All right, Mike is on here on Facebook, Pastor Steve, and in 1 Corinthians 11, verses 4 through 16. And I want to throw us out there as Steve's turning to that. Mike, we're going to be starting up a podcast. And one of the reasons that we're doing that is specifically for questions like this, where Steve can do a deep dive in a different setting. And so that's coming up. I just want to let you know this would be one of the questions that I would look at. But what Mike says is, rather than only going ahead and fully explaining it quickly, can you please point me to a more in-depth study you may have done regarding the interpretation of 1 Corinthians 11, 4 through 16? And then he says, I believe you've said it is a veil, and so is not about whether men wear or women wear hats. It seems that finding that explanation is a bit deeper than a typical reasonably answer investigation brings to the surface. Definitively, I've been distracted by seeing worship folks wearing hats or even wearing them myself in the cold when I exercise outside, since I pray for folks I see during that time. So if it's a hat, I shouldn't have my head covered. If it's a veil, I'm good to go, as I never wear a veil. However, in humility, and then he just goes on, I'm just trying to find an answer, not being legalistic. He quotes a verse in Acts and goes on. So
yeah. So when you're talking about a hat, there's different cultural norms that you have going down through history. And so, for example, when I was a kid, a man would never wear a hat in a room inside.
yeah,
And so you're a messed up unit. You're walking in here with a hat on. And so men wore hats outside, and when they came inside, they just take them off.
Yeah, I grew up. The church I started going to first was a Baptist church, and I would never wear a hat going into that church,
Right.
Just because of the tradition behind it.
Yeah, and so it's a cultural thing. That's what's going on here too in the passage, and Paul makes it clear at the end of the passage that he's speaking culturally. Verse 13, he says, "Judge among yourselves, is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not even nature teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a dishonor to him? If a woman has long hair, it's a glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. But if anyone seems contentious, we have no such custom, neither do the churches of God." And so he's talking about customs in the passage here. And so he makes it clear in the context. And so when you're talking about men being covered, it's really interesting that back in the first century, at least in Greece, men did not cover their heads when they went in to pray, where when you go to Israel nowadays, if you go up to the Western Wall, they give you a kippah. It's a little yarmulke that you put on your head when you go to the Western Wall. You have to cover your head. A man has to cover his head when he goes to the Western Wall. Otherwise, it's considered impolite. Dishonoring to the place. And so different places, different times, different customs, and that's specifically what Paul is talking about here. In the passage, his main issue has to do with women walking around unveiled, and that's the big deal, that women are walking around unveiled. So apparently the women had they were feeling freedom in Christ, and so they were getting rid of things that they didn't want to do, and one of them was a veil. The problem was an unveiled woman was someone who was considered to be a prostitute, especially in Corinth. Corinth was basically it wasn't a seaport, but it had two seaports connected with it. It was a port town, and so they had prostitutes everywhere. And that was something that's how prostitutes would advertise, basically. They walked around unveiled. And so that's what Paul's dealing with here. This would be like a lady walks into church dressed like a hooker is the idea behind it. And I'm talking about to the nines like a hooker. That's what I'm speaking about. And so as far as a more in-depth study of this, whenever I go through 1 Corinthians, and I'm in chapter 11, I go through it in depth. And so you can just get on our website, and you can go to the 1 Corinthians study and go through that. Did you go through in depth when you went through this?
Yeah, I'm sure I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Matt's got some studies on there that will talk about the same thing.
That's a good point, actually. If you guys just download our app, I just want to show you this. You can click on books right there at the top, Old and New Testament. All of Steve's studies are on there. They're categorized for you, and just click on them. I listen to them on double the speed and all the stuff. It's a great resource if you guys don't have our app to get Pastor Steve's studies.
Another thing that you want to get is it. Are we talking to Mike? Is that what he said his name was?
Yes.
Okay, Mike. Another thing that you might want to get is a good Bible program, and so there's some that are for free online, and so eSword is a good one. You can also go to blueletterbible.com, and there's some resources there that you can pick up so that you can get a little bit more info on like I was talking about with the veil thing and what's actually being addressed in the passage. But a good Bible program is always good, is always a great thing to have because you can go specifically into how the language was used at the time. So how the word that's used in this passage for covering is used in the first century, and that's where you get this stuff from. So little historical information goes a long way to interpreting a passage.